two other fights. We talked about Fundora versus Lubin. We talked about Garcia versus Tego. Now we're going to talk about GGG versus Murata, and we're going to speak also about Mosley Jr. versus Rosado, Gabriel Rosado. Let me start off with Mosley Jr. versus Gabriel Rosado. Impressive performance by Shane Mosley Jr. Kept, Gabe at the end of his stick, at the end of the jab, set up the right hand very nicely, and punctuated the fight at the end by having Gabe in all kinds of problems with that right hand, that left hook combination. Beautiful stuff by Shane Mosley Jr. Shout out to Shane Mosley Jr. Man, you looked great in that fight against Gabe Rosado, the veteran, KG veteran. Gabe was game, don't get me wrong, but he got hurt and got rocked. And I believe it's the 10th and final round. I think it was the 10th rounder by Shane Mosley Jr. A beautiful performance by Shane Mosley Jr. I heard people booing early on in the fight, but then people got involved into the fight. I don't know what is wrong with the boxing public these days, but a lot of people are just stupid. They don't know how to watch fights and see what's going on, what's developing, and how a fight actually erupts into a knockout, right? People don't know that you have to set up knockouts. It's knockouts don't just come, right? And, unfortunately for Ryan Garcia, he was trying to press for a knockout as well. Very exciting fighter. But you don't press for the knockout. What you do, yeah, you do press for the knockout, but if the knockout come, it come. What you got to do is do what you're supposed to do to set up the knockout. You can't press for a knockout if you ain't set it up. So anyway, a lot of people just don't understand that. Shane Mosley Jr., man, he got the power like his father. He's longer, leaner. Man, he looked really good in that fight against Gabe Rosado. Pieced him up really nice and good, controlled him. Would not engage in things where, Rosado was desperate, so he was trying to make it in a brawl, and Mosley Jr. was like, that ain't happening, bro. And the way how he pieced him up, just in the finale, how he just, and Rosado was like, bring it on. And Mosley was like, all right, you won't get it. I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you something to remember. And he really pieced him up nice and sweet piece up. Didn't get him out of there, but he pieced him up. I mean, it was beautiful. Probably Shane Mosley Jr.'s best performance, I just don't like, people who, boo fights and you're not watching to see what's really going on in the fight, and you're not appreciating the pugilistic excellence of a boxer or what boxers are doing in there. It really irritates me because, man, I just want to punch a fool like that, punch them straight in the face and knock them the hell out, because those clowns is what making boxing so difficult. It's the Larry Merchants of this world that make boxing difficult, because guys be doing things in there, and then these stupid announcers or these stupid people, they want to say, out of the clear blue sky, he knocks him out, not understanding that the dude was setting it up all the time. You know what I'm saying? Knockouts are just, you're not happy-go-lucky. You don't just throw punches in the ring and knockouts come. Okay, you have to set. If you're a knockout artist, you have to set up the knockout. And you have to understand what's going on in there. And as either sometimes these announcers willfully do not educate the fans on what's going on in there, or it is that they are so stupid that they don't even know what's going on in there. You know what I'm saying? But it really irritates me because I love to see high-level boxing is always chess. It's always chess. And so I love to see what one boxer is doing, what the other boxer is doing in reaction to him. How boxers adjust and adapt to whatever is happening. Do I like barn burners? Hell yeah. Like anybody else, I like a good fight. But at the end of the day, there are different standards of fights. There are different levels to boxing. And a barn burner is cool because you're looking at one guy take a punch and he's still standing, and he's dishing back. That's beautiful, but that's like level 1. You know what I mean? Especially if you know that the guy can actually fight better than he's fighting. Then, if you want to get me disgusted about a fight, is for me to see a guy who can do much better, and I know it, and he's condescending to a certain level, whether it's to please the fans or whatever. He's condescending to a lower level of what he can do. I hate that. because I come from a boxing. I come from a boxing perspective, and I actually box. So if you want to see me get ticked off, throw away all your skills and just throw caution to the wind and just wing it. Man, I don't want to see that. I shut the TV off. I shut off my video. I won't watch you. Okay. So anyway, Shane Mosley, hell of a performance. It was one of his best performances I've seen. And I mean, he made Gabe Rosado look like he was just a brawler. He made him look like he didn't belong in the ring with him, and he dispatched of him. You give him a couple more seconds, he would have dispatched of Gabe Rosado, because Gabe Rosado would have been out on his shield. He'd have dispatched him. He's supposed to be dispatched. And that tells me Shane Mosley, if he can be more consistent, Junior, and I can see he's growing by leaps and bones with Bones Adams, I can see this dude, taking on elite competition at 168. Okay? So he's really improving by leaps and bounds. I'm looking forward to seeing more from him just off of this fight, and the way how he built up to it was just great. So I just wanted to talk about him. All right, let's talk about the next fight. The fight most of you guys want to hear me talk about would be Triple G versus Ryota Murata. Okay, first of all, Ryota Murata learned a lot from watching the Derevyanchenko fight, and also from looking at Canelo winning for Triple G, because he was religiously going to the body when he could. Had a hell of a right hand. That right hand was a problem for Triple G. Triple G, okay, he's slower. He's slower, but he's bigger. I'll just look at Triple G versus Murata. Murata looked like a little boy compared to Triple G, but he punched like a mule. Mule. Triple G had to respect that power. Triple G was using his defense, which was very impressive. Very impressive. I said Murata hurt Triple G. Yes, very badly. Very badly. Triple G actually backed off and started to cover up and move around the ring, and Murata was just coming at him. Shout out to Rosado in the building. It was to me, Murata did much better than I even expected him to do. Okay? He showed me a couple things. One, he showed me he had a decent jab. Two, he showed me that he could seek and destroy, and not only that, but he used angles. He dipped underneath the punches that Triple G would be throwing. He got out of the way of certain shots, blocked certain shots, was standing toe-to-toe with Triple G and doing his thing. I was very impressed with Murata, to be honest with you, because up to this point, I didn't think much of him. A dude who was from the Mayweather boxing gym, beat him. He knocked out the guy afterwards, but to me, all I knew Murata for was his right hand. But he showed me he had a lot more, and a lot more versatility. The only difference was Triple G, you could tell Triple G is tough. Like, you hit him in the head, you're not really doing much to him. Murata hit him with some straight right hands, a series of straight right hands to the head. And he backed him up. But, just look at Triple G. Triple G was so much bigger than the dude. And you could tell his conditioning was ridiculous. So at the end of the day, the difference between Triple G and Murata was this. It wasn't that Triple G was a better boxer than Murata. Murata actually shocked me. He had better boxing skills than I thought. I think it's conditioning. I think Triple G could take the punishment that Murata could dish out. Murata couldn't take what Triple G was. He was getting chipped down. And then Triple G is so much more crisp, so much more precise with his offense. His offense is so sharp. He's very sharp with his shots, very sharp with his placement, and his combinations are, I'm shocked, they're blisteringly fast. Okay? And it just reminded me of how clinical Triple G really is. He's very, very clinical, very intentional about his offense. His defense is much better than I thought it would be. So it means that, him being with this new trainer, this new coach, is working out pretty well. Because when he got hurt, he knew what to do. He knew how to clinch. He knew how to back off. He knew how to keep that guard a certain kind of way to brace a lot of the shots. He still got caught flush with a lot of shots, but Murata can punch. Okay? Murata, if one thing Murata can do very well, it's punch. You're going to have to excuse me because for some reason my video is messing up right now. Hold on a second. Still breaking up a little bit, but we a little bit better. So what was one thing that Murata can do is punch. He punched like a mule, and clearly Triple G felt some of his punches. If Murata would go to the body more, but he get counter up top to the head because Triple G was countering him. The pace of the fight was still too slow. Murata more of a plodding, slow fighter. If that pace, see what Derevyanchenko was doing with Triple G, why he was able to beat up Triple G so bad, was when you're dealing with a veteran, you have to go at a pace that you know is hard for the veteran to be comfortable in. You have to press the pace. For those of you who are in the boxing groups, different boxing groups, I put up different posts. On one of my posts, I was talking about how, you know, the younger generation would blow out the older generation and remove them. You think of Oscar De La Hoya versus Julio Cesar Chavez. You think Costa Azul versus Julio Cesar Chavez, right? You think of why I say Costa Azul was a generation after Chavez, right? You think of Terry Norris versus Sugar Ray Leonard. You think of Mike Tyson versus Michael Spinks, or even Mike Tyson versus Larry Holmes, right? The younger generation, generally, they get rid of the older generation, right? They beat their ass out the ring. And I was trying to explain to people, you know, in one of my posts that I put up in, I think it was Boxing, Pugilism, Highlights of History, that it's a very important point, is that each successive generation of fighter actually improves on certain things that the generation before them, I'm talking the elite ones, improves on the generation before them because they've been watching that generation so much, right? And I say this is why dudes don't hang around forever and beat everybody and then just retire and get out of there. Now, there's one or two guys that have done that through history. Carlos Monzon, Floyd Mayweather, Archie Moore. You know, there one or two guys that done that. But again, just right after them, right after those guys left, they were like on the cusp of getting their ass beat. But just right after those guys left, there was a generation of fighters that would come in that probably would have beaten them off as well. Okay, and it's, you have to understand. I'm going through this because I'm talking about Triple G. You need to understand what I'm saying so that the Triple G context will make sense. A lot of times people say, "Oh, well, this fighter beat this fighter because this fighter was old." That's not the major reason, because that same old ass fighter was beating a whole set of fighters just a minute ago, right? Triple G's old ass as hell. He's 40 years old. And he beat Ryuta Murata, who's a very good fighter and a world champion. He was a long-range world champion as well, from Japan. So it takes a certain generation of fighter with a certain set of elite skills to beat Triple G, to get him off his throne. You get what I'm saying? Canelo did it, right? Canelo did it. But there's a reason Canelo was able to beat Triple G. It's not just youth. If it was just youth and ability, and if the older fighters lost their abilities, Triple G would be out of there already. Triple G would be out of there already. Right? It's not just that. And I try to explain that in the group, but a lot of people, you know how people are. You know how people are. A lot of people are arrogant, so they don't want to hear you. And they just spout the same bullshit over and over again. Oh, he was just so old. Pacquiao was just too old for Ugas. Ugas was old. Ugas is 35 years old at the time he faced Pacquiao. He's now, what is he going to be, 36, 37? Okay, he's old. That don't mean shit. Shane Mosley knocked out Antonio Margarito at the age of 37. Bernard Hopkins knocked out Oscar De La Hoya at the age of 43. Oscar De La Hoya was in his 20s. So please stop with the bullshit. Stop bullshitting me, okay? We've seen old fighters way past their prime beat younger fighters. And they've decayed, and their abilities have decayed. But I will explain to you why sometimes, like, okay, now Triple G, we're going to talk about Triple G. Why was Triple G able to beat Ryuta Murata? Ryuta Murata got the age advantage. He could punch like a mule, just like Triple G. What was it? I'm going to tell y'all. One, it's a good thing that he's with Lloyd what's his name? What's the trainer's name for Triple G? Not Lloyd Banks. What is it? Something Banks. Jonathan Banks. It's a good thing with Jonathan Banks because he understands to last in boxing, you need to get hit less. All right? You need to get hit less. So your defense is one of the first things you need to have longevity in boxing. That's right, right. Jonathan Banks. Thank you very much. Did you want to do well against Canelo, though? Not this Golovkin. Well, do you know why he wouldn't do well against Canelo? Is it because he's old? Because this is the excuse they always give. He's old. That's why he's not going to do well against Canelo. And I won't say that's the reason, but there are many different reasons. But the reason I will propose to you why he will not do well against Canelo is it's very simple. People say it's age because he slowed down. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about boxing. All right? You look at, and I'm going to mention his name again, Floyd Mayweather. Okay? If you look at a clip of him just recently there, he's 45 years old. Okay? His legs don't work like they used to. His hands don't work like they used to. But he looks spectacular on the mitts, right? But a 45-year-old Floyd Mayweather is very experienced at the championship level, ladies and gentlemen. And if that 45-year-old needs to go back in the ring in a pro fight, to fight whoever it may be, this one thing I will tell you. He won't ever do it, but I'm just saying. He's not going in there to lose. And he's going to use every single bit of his experience, even though all his faculties don't work like they used to. Floyd Mayweather, I'm going to use Floyd Mayweather first, but I'm going to go back to Triple G. But I want to use two people because these people were undefeated. I could use Carlos Monzon too, but he wasn't really out of his prime. He was still in his prime when he retired. Or Rocky Marciano. He was still in his prime when he retired. I want to talk about out of prime guys who never got beat by people at the championship level at least. Okay? Archie Moore and Floyd Mayweather. And I'm going to talk about Gennady Golovkin after. See, you could be slower than your opponent. You could have lost a whole bunch of steps. Your reaction time could have slowed down. Your speed and the angles and the agility that you used to have could decrease. But this is not a sport that depends solely on your physical abilities. In fact, boxing is 99% mental knowledge. I'm sorry, not 99, 90%. Sorry, my bad. 90% knowledge. 10% about physicality. Okay? So, if I can share a nugget of wisdom with you guys, it would be this. A younger fighter is not going to have the experience. A prime young fighter is never going to have the experience of a veteran. He's not going to. Now, Canelo's a unique guy in that he's in his prime still. Almost out of his prime, by the way. He's a vet, but his shelf life is a little slower because he's fighting so many fights. High-level fights, by the way. And his training is what's giving him wear and tear. It's not the fight itself. But going back to what I'm saying, the veteran, his advantage is experience. I'm going to explain this to you guys, okay? Because this is something they don't talk in boxing much, but it's understood by boxers and fighters. The veteran has experience. That is what he's going to pass on to the young prime fighter. School is in session. Whether the veteran wins or not, you're going to learn something when you face a vet, okay? So, that is what the veteran brings to the table, okay? Now, the prime fighter doesn't have that kind of experience on their side unless they started very early and they've been at the top level for a very long time. All right, guys like Canelo, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, they have that. So Pacquiao was a veteran in the sport while he was in his prime. So was Floyd, and so now is Canelo. Okay? Now, having said that, I want you to understand that is the advantage that a veteran fighter has in the sport of boxing. Now, here's the thing. The problem with most veteran fighters are that they do not change up their game. I'm giving y'all what it is. You have to adjust to the times. And this is why I tell you, boxing as a sport evolves. Even now, as we speaking in competition, guys are sharpening up their games because their competition is sharpening up their games. Their competition is learning more stuff. It's all about knowledge in boxing. It's the smartest man that wins a fight, generally speaking. There are some lucky dudes, but there's not much luck in boxing. You got to make a mistake for another guy to capitalize on you. So, in short, boxing rewards the prepared, the versatile, the skilled. Mind you, I didn't say the talented. I didn't say the God-gifted. I said the skilled. I say the hard-working skilled. The honing of the skills. It will reward you for it. But you can't just have any old skills. You must have the defensive skills and the offensive skills. Particularly the defensive skills for longevity. Let me say it again. The defensive skills for longevity. Archie Moore won the light heavyweight championship of the world at the age of 36. Was never defeated as a world champion at light heavyweight level, and actually won, which a lot of people overlook, the heavyweight championship of the world as given by the California State Athletic Commission at the time. So a version of the heavyweight championship, Archie Moore won. I know a lot of you guys don't know that, but I'll just break it to you. Okay? So this man, and that's why he actually got a shot at the title against Rocky Marciano, because he beat what's the guy? I think it was Valdez. I believe it was Valdez he beat. Anyways, my point being, Archie Moore was known for the cross-arm defense. You know, all those heavyweights out there be doing this stuff here, and trapping things, walking to you like that. That's called a cross-arm defense. It's actually an extension of the Philly shell when used properly. Blocks uppercuts as well. But you can catch punches and you can throw over the catch. Okay? Archie Moore was a defensive fighter. One of the best defensive fighters of all time. So you had the defense. The other thing Archie Moore had, and this is what a lot of you guys misunderstand, and this is why when I hear fighters ducking other fighters, I say, you can't do that. It's part of the process. You must go through the fire. He was fire tested. Archie Moore faced Ezra Charles, Charlie Burley, Eddie Booker, Lloyd Marshall. Listen to the names I'm talking about now. Charles Doc Williams, Joey Maxim. Okay? You got to go through the fire, ladies and gentlemen. He was tried, tested. He had all the tough fights before. You understand? Okay? So when he finally got his opportunity to become light heavyweight champion of the world at 36 years old, he was more than ready. And even though his physical abilities had diminished, I want you guys to understand what I'm saying. He wasn't the prime. He wasn't the prime, what's his name? Prime Archie Moore. No. If y'all saw prime Archie Moore, y'all be like, oh my God. No. He was nothing like that dude anymore. But he made adjustments to his style. He started to fight smarter, not harder. Now, modern fighters today will tell you these things. Smarter, not harder. You heard Floyd saying that a lot, right? You have to learn to fight smarter, not harder. It means you have to adjust your style. You have to reinvent yourself. This Bernard Hopkins first started off as the executioner. Then he had to become what? The alien. Now he B-Hop. Right? You can't fight the same way for your entire career. It can't happen. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, ladies and gentlemen. You have to make adjustments. You have to make adjustments for your lack of ability. And here's the thing. See, I told you, boxing is mental. It's a smart sport. You have to be smart. So I'm breaking gems to you guys because a lot of you guys don't know shit about boxing. I'm going to be honest with you. Now, I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. But a lot of you don't know shit about boxing. So, what do you do when your tools are starting to get smaller and smaller? You can't make new tools, so what do? You sharpen. You sharpen the tools that you work with, and you refine the tools that you're good at. And you get so good at it and so sharp at it, people don't notice the decline. They don't notice the decline in your lateral movement. They don't just, okay. And you're able to, and you have to outwork everybody out there. It's a certain mindset. So when you look at Archie Moore, for those of you who don't know, go watch Archie Moore versus Yvon Durrell from Canada. Yvon Durrell from Canada dropped him twice early in the fight. Looked like he was going to get stopped. But he didn't get stopped. He had a championship heart, and he worked behind his defense. And he stopped that dude in the 11th round of their 15-rounder. And in the rematch, he got him out of there much sooner. My point being, the youngster came up, and he had something new. He had something new Archie hadn't seen before. And he caught him with a shot that Archie didn't expect. Championship heart. He hung in there, held his defense, and made the adjustment to something he hadn't seen before. Okay? And what happens is, and I'm gonna talk about this over and over because longevity in boxing, people talk about longevity in boxing in terms of fights. I'm gonna talk about longevity in boxing in terms of levels. I'm gonna talk about it in terms of levels. Because a lot of y'all don't know shit about boxing. It ain't make no sense. I mean, it's good to see a fighter fight through different decades and all that. But if you ain't at the championship level, why am I wasting my time? You just there fighting. That's cool, but that's not what I... But when you're at the championship level and you staying champion, you maintaining that championship level, that's something worth talking about. Everybody want to talk about people in their primes and people in their primes and people in their primes. What about the people who superseded their primes and kept on fighting at the highest level and staying king of the mountain even though they're not in their primes? How are they able to do it? That's why I'm breaking gems for you guys. Because a lot of people out here, they're full of shit. To be honest with you, they know what the dogma is, and they go with that. Okay. But there's a defined few who actually use their brains, which is what you're supposed to do in boxing anyway, because it's a thinking man's sport, aka Mike Tyson, Roger Mayweather said that. The smartest man in the ring will win. It's a thinking man's sport. Boxing ain't no... It is not a sport where it's just about throwing hands. There's much more to it than that. So, in a thinking man's sport, to sustain that longevity... And when I talk about longevity, I'm talking at the highest level. I don't care if you were in the sport. You could be in the sport till you was 50, but you ain't really fighting nobody. And even if you do, you fight somebody, you lose. You didn't make it. You didn't make it back to the pinnacle. All right, then I don't care about that. But I do care about Shane Mosley versus Antonio Margarito. I do care about Juan Manuel Marquez versus Juan Diaz. I do care about Juan Manuel Marquez versus Manny Pacquiao 4. I do care about Manny Pacquiao versus young Timothy Bradley twice. Put him on his ass twice in the third fight. Manny Pacquiao against Jesse Vargas. Manny Pacquiao, these are champions we're talking about he's going up against. WBO champions, but nonetheless champions. Okay? And then, of course, the crowning act. What I think Manny Pacquiao's greatest win of his career, bearing in mind his age as well, was the Keith Thurman fight. Nobody can say nothing about Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is still to this day, his motivation is all over the place, but is still to this day one of the top heavyweights in the heavyweight division. Period. He's smart, he's sharp, he's wily, and he's unorthodox. And you cannot take. I could put an asterisk on everybody else. I could put it on Cotto because it was a catchweight. I could put it on Oscar because he was weight drained. I could put it on Margarito. It was a catchweight. You know, those are supposedly his biggest wins, right? Joshua Clottey. I could say Joshua Clottey, he was inactive. He didn't feel like he'd throw hands in between. Okay, we can talk about him. And Clottey was never seen as a top guy. He never was a unified world champion. He never was at one point in time, the number one welterweight in the world. It was none of that went along with it. Keith Thurman was all those things. Okay? Margarito was for a moment the number one welterweight in the world, and he cheated to get that position. It should have been Cotto, right? And on top of that, he was never unified, right? Keith Thurman did something that and unified. Okay, so let me put something in. Let me talk a little bit about something here, just to make a point. The two belts that really matter in boxing, that have history. There are two belts that have history in boxing. Is the WBC and WBA belts. Them other two belts, the WBO and the IBF, as much as the IBF, you know, they do their mandatories and try to do the right thing. But the WBO and IBF came off of the WBA. For those of you who don't know, that's what happened. They butted off of the WBA. They didn't like how the WBA was doing things, and so they formed their organizations. The least belt in all of the belts out there is the WBO. It's the most recent belt as well. Nobody really cared Nobody really cared to have the WBO belt. And the guy who's usually a WBO champion, he's left to himself. No, only unless you want to collect the belt, you go and it's kind of more with people in Europe value that belt more than anything else. Okay, the IBF belt is not as prestigious as WBA and the WBC, even though their regulations are actually much better. And they're more straightforward as a sanctioning body, but they are not as valuable as the WBC and WBA. And let me tell you why. It's the history of the WBC and WBA. Okay, the WBA. Okay, I'm going here because I need to explain to you what Keith Thurman is. The WBA was known as the NBA back in I think they came into being 1921, if I'm not mistaken. 1921, the NBA, also known as the National Boxing Association, was in response to the NYSAC, which now has been passed on its sanctioning powers mostly to the WBC. Okay, the BBC and the NYSAC, which is the New York State Athletic Commission, right? That they agreed that now this WBC, which was newly formed, would be the body that would replace them. Okay. We're gonna talk about Triple G. We get into Triple G. Don't worry. I just want to make a point. I'm coming to Triple G. I'm coming to Triple G, my boy. So, anyways, so the point is that what is known as the WBC today is really replacing the NYSAC, or the New York State Athletic Commission. Okay, those were the two belts. One was formed in 1920, and in response to that, we had the NBA, which was part of the WBC, and then the Ring Magazine came in 1922. So there are three belts. Yeah, the Ring Magazine was for the lineal champion, blah 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 blah. Okay, so let me talk about this. Keith Thurman had those two original belts, the WBA and WBC. Not only was he the number one welterweight in the world after Floyd Mayweather left, but he was also, what in throwback terms, he would be called undisputed champion, because those are the original two belts that made you undisputed. Okay? Them other belts don't really matter that much. But the WBC, WBA, they have a lot of history, and they are the original belts that if you talk about undisputed, whether it was heavyweight or whatever, you know, those are the two belts that you had to have. Okay? And Keith Thurman collected them separately. He first inherited the WBA from being upgraded to regular champion. I think fought Robert Guerrero for the Super Championship WBA. And then he fought Danny Garcia for the WBC, and he beat Danny Garcia. All right? So, when we talk about Keith Thurman, he's not like Joshua Clottey or Miguel Cotto or like a Margarito. No, he the real deal. So when Pacquiao beat him at the age of 40. I think Thurman was 30, 31, whatever he was. That's huge. It was tremendous. Okay, because I picked Thurman to beat him. I thought, but I guess I was wrong. And the point is, it was a close fight. But the point I'm making is that's a tremendous achievement. That's more than any achievement. And then he was 40 years on top of that. Okay? And my point being this. While Pacquiao's style is essentially the same, he didn't really reinvent himself. But after the knockout, he stopped doing certain moves. And he also became more efficient in how he punched. The amount of punches he threw was significantly less than when he was in his prime, as they say. And he became much more cunning and wily. And Keith Thurman at the end of the fight said this about him. He said, I expected Pacquiao to come in at certain times. I expected him to charge in. He didn't do that. He was actually much more, what's the word he used? Composed. He said he was much more composed. And he was actually much more wily. And that is what happens when you develop as a fighter and you become a veteran fighter and you are past your prime. You have to fight smarter, not harder. Which means you may be doing the same moves, but your timing might be slightly different. Right? Your rhythm might be slightly different. And people don't realize it. Or you might actually be putting in other moves from very early in your career. When you used to actually body punch. Or when you actually used to use your jab. Or when you actually used to use the lead left and the right hand. But also, you used to not just sidestep and come in wildly and stuff. No, you actually used to use your boxing. I've seen Pacquiao outbox guys when he was in his teens. He would outbox guys. He could box. Pacquiao actually can box. So, my point anyway is this. That guys like Pacquiao, guys like Mayweather, there's a reason why they had their longevity. It's not just that you can't keep on doing the same things you do in your prime. So you got to figure out other ways to do things more efficiently and improve on the strengths that you have, but not just make them a calling card. So you're not the most predictable guy in the world. And that is what these guys did to keep their longevity. And that's why I say I rate them very highly. Now, up to Gennady Golovkin. So, some of you guys say he's slower on the inside. And yeah, I see he's slower. I see that I see that his movement has changed. Okay? I see also that he's hunched over more. I see his punch resistance is not as great as it used to be. I see all those things. But here's the thing. He won. How? Well, first and foremost, Gennady Golovkin went back to the fundamentals of boxing. Not to say that he didn't have the fundamentals before, but he's not going to just let, where he can, he's not going to let this dude have free shots at him. Okay? Unlike the Steve Rose fight, where Steve Rose was just cranking off the shots on him, he wasn't just letting Murata just have free shots on him. Okay? 2, the other thing that was with Gennady Golovkin, besides working behind his jab and the fundamentals, is that if you notice, and that's why he got Jonathan Banks, very smart guy. Gennady Golovkin is a smart guy. You're not going to have that timing and speed that you used to have. He knows this. He also knows his reaction time is going to be slower. So what does he use, ladies and gentlemen? The high guard. Gennady Golovkin is using more of the high guard now than he did before, because now you have to use that because you're not as quick as you used to be. You understand what I'm saying? Look at the adjustments the old guy was using. He's smart, wily. He also understood that he had to wait for pauses in the guys, because the other guy throws pretty fast. And then he throws quick combinations. He won't try to put heat on every single punch, but you just want to touch him. Some of it will land, some of it won't. But the setup punch, he had the setup punch ready. And it didn't always land because Murata was smart enough to understand that. And he was throwing his combinations at different speeds. Again, you gotta understand what he's doing. He's gathering data in the first round. He's gathering data in the second round. He's pouring it on in the third round. He's easing it up. But he's mixing the shots. You saw him, he was just pity-patting Murata against the ropes at certain points. Trying to get his timing, trying to get his rhythm, trying to get his movement, right? You got to understand what Gennady Golovkin was doing. It's a higher level of boxing, even higher than when he was in his prime, when he was really blazing guys out of there. Because the guys he was facing in his prime, they know now this guy can be beat, right? There's all this going on here, right? They know Canelo beat him. They saw Derevyanchenko beat him, right? So they got this data in there. He's aware of this stuff. And again, a smart fighter stays ahead of his competition. So he has to make adjustments to the times, to this new generation of fighters. That's what that's what you guys miss. That the guys at the top have to stay on their game. You can't be, while he was training his ass off and staying on his game, knowing that these guys going to go to his body. Knowing that they see vulnerabilities in him. And now he has to close up those vulnerabilities by keeping fundamentals. If you're a slow fighter, what I mean by that is you're plotting with your feet, you're slow with your feet, you've got to change up something so that your opponent underestimates you. You have to catch them at times when they're not expecting it. And how do you do that as a slow fighter? Timing. 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 You don't have to have all this super speed in boxing. You don't have to have super speed in fighting. You've seen old guys beat up young guys in street fights or in hand-to-hand combat. They didn't do it in a straight-up one-on-one, no. But they did it because they knew certain things and their timing. They're waiting for you to attack and then they will counter you. And that's what Triple G did sometimes with Murata. He led at certain times and then he countered at certain times. And when you're countering a guy, it's because you know what kind of combination he's coming at you with because you baited him, which is called bait and counter. Bait and counter. You bait him into a situation where he's doing something that you can predict because you set it up. You see what I'm saying? Y'all gotta understand boxing's a heady thing, man. Boxing ain't no stupid, I hit you, you hit me. That's not boxing. So the old veteran was setting up the younger kid. He had him throwing those right hands, throwing the right hand after right hand, and he's timing the right hands. Because I'm slower than your ass. I know that. But I can time your ass to counter you. And then mount my attack. See? Wily. You got to be smart. Now, how did he control the pace of the fight? How did he control the pace of the fight so that he had Murata working at his pace? So you understand all these things. If you don't understand these things, you're just doing this. Okay? You're just doing this. You're just flapping your gums. We're going to talk boxing now. We're talking boxing. Okay? So he controlled the pace of the fight two ways. Okay? First one, he sidestepped Murata. Go watch the footage again. He's slow as hell, but he sidestepped you. And sidestepping don't take a lot of energy. Again, smarter, not harder. Let me show you something. So, some fighters, they like to jiggle all around the ring and all this shit. That's bullshit. In boxing, you must know the pivot. The key to boxing is the pivot. So I'm here in front of you, and I'm not anymore. I'm here in front of you, and I'm not anymore. I could be slow as a fucking slug. I'm going to get out of your way. Easy. Because I just have to pivot to get out of your way. Slide pivots for flat-footed fighters. You can watch the slide pivot with Danny Garcia, and you can watch it with Triple G. Okay? Master of the slide pivot. Beautiful stuff. You slide into range, you slide out of range. Pivot. It's a circle, ladies and gentlemen. It's called a square circle for a reason. You don't got to do all this moving and excessive movement. You understand? So that is what Triple G used on Murata. He sidestepped him a couple times and was able to get him with shots because Murata comes straight in. Okay? And all of this I'm saying not to over exaggerate certain things, but to try and get a point across to people that to stay at the top, it takes a lot of stuff, man. It takes a lot of stuff to stay at the top of a sport. And there's young, hungry guys coming for you. Okay? And you have to adjust with the times. You have to be able to understand the modern techniques and the modern strategy and the modern way how modern boxers are fighting now. If you stay in them old school ways, you can get washed. They're going to cook you. Because guess what? They've been watching those old school ways too. Okay? I said it. I'm going to say it. I'm going to be on record saying this. Floyd Mayweather, if he was to face Terrence Crawford or he was to face Jerome Ennis, I believe those guys would beat him. Okay? I believe those guys are the next. They're the next generation. It had nothing to do with whether Floyd was in his prime or not. It just has to do with what those guys bring to the table, their capabilities. I know they haven't beaten nobody yet, but on his level. But what I'm saying is, the eye test tells me everything. I see what they do when it's shifting. I see where they shift. I see how they slide back. I see how they discontrol. I see how composed they are. I see how quick they can capture the angle and understand and dissect a fighter. They dissect fighters very quickly. Okay? And then they control them. You know, that boxing IQ is something you can tell they watched Floyd amongst many other greats. Okay? And this is the point I'm trying to make to people. A lot of you guys say Canelo would beat Triple G. I'm going to tell you why he would beat Triple G. It's very simple. Triple G is one generation. Canelo's another generation. And Canelo has the best of both worlds because he was actually a contemporary Triple G. But if you look at his age, he's much younger, right? He's 10 years younger. Right? He's another generation. Triple G was around way before Canelo. Okay? Floyd was around way before Canelo. Pacquiao was around right? So Canelo's another generation down the road. He's actually a contemporary of he's a unique contemporary because he's contemporary of Charlo and Demetrius Andrews. He's actually their contemporaries. They're actually older than him, right? But you know, Canelo's different in the sense of this. If you look at Canelo, every single fight, Canelo does something a little bit different. If you look at the fight with Caleb Plant, you know, he froze him, right? So he's here holding Caleb Plant's arm in between here, in between his right hand. I saw him do it with Sergey Kovalev, but in a different style. And he extends Caleb Plant's jabbing arm, so Caleb Plant's jabbing arm is out like this, so he can catch him with the right hand underneath there, right? We've seen him use that technique in a different kind of way against Sergey Kovalev. Canelo's more of a plotting fighter. To get most leverage out of his punches, he comes to you with what we call precise footwork. He's cutting them angles really well. He's cutting off the ring very well, and he's applying pressure. So Ryan Garcia used that precise footwork against Tego, right? But Tego, see, this is what I'm trying to tell y'all. Precise footwork doesn't work for everybody. Tego knows about this stuff. Tego a boxer. And so Tego was able to use his footwork and his upper body movement to nullify that precise footwork and get jabs in, get right hands in, get hooks in. Now, he was at a deficit in terms of he was shorter, he was less long, he was slower, but he was able to time. And this is what I'm telling you about defense. He was the veteran. He was able to time Garcia. Like I was saying in the other one, with Carlos Rios versus Floyd Mayweather. These veterans know how to time you, and they can find those loopholes. See, Ryan can't shoot. I'm going to tell something to Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia, you can't shoot everything at the same speed. Bro, you might be fast, But you got to vary it. You got to change up your speed. You got to vary your speed. Otherwise, he knows you're going to throw. He knows when you're going to throw. He's watching your footwork. He's watching your body language. He knows when you're going to throw. So while Ryan is very fast and he doesn't even telegraph his punches, his feet betray him. That's all I'm going to say about that. So anyway, in the case of Canelo, take for instance Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol. It's going to be a hard fight for Canelo because Bivol's got that footwork, bro. I mean, is what it is. But when it comes to Triple G's going to be the one with the problems because Canelo got that footwork. That's why Triple G could never cut off the ring on Canelo. And Canelo knew he had such good footwork that he walked down Triple G the second fight. And I'm going to tell you why. Again, the pivot. Let me say it again. The pivot. What part of this does anybody not understand? Floyd Mayweather would tell you the same thing. In fact, I started talking about the pivot, and then I heard Floyd Mayweather start talking about the pivot. Andre Ward always talking about footwork. What's the first thing you need to learn in boxing besides your stance? It's your feet. Where to put them. Mikey Garcia, when he's talking about facing arrow spin, it's about the footwork. Okay? And Canelo has quicker feet than Triple G. Let's just put it that way. So he can get in position faster than Triple G. Not to say that Triple G can't box and he can't, like I said before, even if he has quicker feet, you can take away some of the angles by just simply pivoting, right? But you have to slide first before you pivot because you got to get the angle. I don't know if some of you guys ain't gonna understand what I'm saying, so it don't even matter. But so if anybody know anything about slipping and sliding, slip and slide, bob and weave, you know, those are drills. Anyway, dip and slip, and so on. These are the things that are fundamentals in boxing. And you can build off the fundamentals. And the thing about it is, yeah, you have fundamentals in boxing, jab and whatever. But at the end of the day, every new generation brings a wrinkle to that. They do things a little bit different. And this is what people don't understand. This is why Floyd beat Genaro Hernandez. Genaro Hernandez is all around very good fighter. All right? Hernandez came out and pushed the pace against Floyd, trying to rattle him to see what his experience was like. Floyd didn't have all that experience, but the sort of skill set that Floyd brought to the table, Genaro hadn't quite seen that kind of skill set put together, the way how it was put together. Right? Same thing with Oscar. Genaro wanted to see what they had, what they do. Some of the things Genaro is very familiar with, but the way how it's executed is different to what he had seen before. And so it's not just to beat a veteran, to beat a guy from a certain generation. It's not just youth and agility, because as we saw, Triple G took that from Murata. He outlasted Murata, 1. 2, because his cardio was better. He paced himself better than Murata. Okay? He set it up so he was in control, and Murata was reacting to him, helping him to dictate the fight, even though at times he was taking punishment. He was the guy dictating the fight. His defense was much better, so he was able to not get hit with too many of Murata's money shots. And even though Murata hurt him in the fight, he was able to recoup from that because, again, using defensive maneuvers. The jab, circling out, resetting. You understand? His cardio was better than Murata. So it takes a certain kind of fighter to beat a legend. Just the first thing you need to understand. Adonis Ugas, it wasn't because Pacquiao was old that Adonis Ugas beat Pacquiao. No, that can't be. Why? Well, 1, I don't care what excuse Pacquiao makes, but 1, he beat Keith Thurman. Doing the same things he was doing against Ugas. Ugas took away the angles from him. He circled anti-clockwise, taking away those angles. He countered over Pacquiao's jab with a jab, or his right hook with a jab. Snap back and then come over with the jab. He used the high guard to block a lot of the punches, but he used it effectively, circling Manny Pacquiao. came up with the looping right hand. Sometimes shoot it straight. Sometimes shoot to the body. He changed it up, mix it up, right? He had a blueprint on how to beat Manny Pacquiao. He'd seen it. Next generation are smarter guys. And you have to have a good trainer. So it's not just agility and so on. A prime fighter and prime. In fact, Juan Manuel Marquez, at the end of his prime, is where he really started to pick up and have a great career. Marquez's greatest achievements and his career blossomed and did well when he was not in his prime. Same thing with Hopkins. Well, Hopkins was in his prime, but the latter end of his prime, again, most of his achievements was out of his prime. And it's not that the fighters that he was facing weren't great fighters of his time. Oscar De La Hoya, Felix Trinidad. I mean, you name it, the list goes on and on. Kelly Pavlik, they were all great. And Pavlik was another generation from him. That wasn't the reason they couldn't beat him. Chad Dawson, Taylor, Kovalev beat him, not just because they were long, not just because of their style of fighting. It's because they realized and were smart enough fighters to understand the holes in what he was doing, and what they were doing complemented those holes, and he couldn't overcome those things. Okay? Smart fighters, next generation fighters, they always bring something else to the table that can counter something that and if you not be able to adjust, you don't make the necessary adjustments, you don't learn how to adjust to those things, you'll always lose. Yeah, nothing to do with prime or no prime. It's the knowledge. Anyways, that's what I got. So you really got to appreciate guys like Gennady Golovkin, Manny Pacquiao, Sugar Shane Mosley, Bernard Hopkins, Archie Moore. Guys who stayed at the top of the game. We're talking about at the top of the game. They world champions and stuff. And the longer they stay world champions is even more impressive. Pacquiao, Mayweather, Marquez. We got a handful of them. There are not many of them that really. I mean, even Sugar Ray Robinson to some degree. I mean, he won the last time he won a title. I think he was 30. What was he? 35. I think he was 35. And then after that, he never won a world title after that. But he did fight for championships after that. But my point anyway is this. Longevity at the top, at the highest level, it comes because the people reinvent themselves. It's not that their skills are not decaying. They're human, just like everybody else. Their skills are decaying. They can arrest some of the decay. But it's what they do well. They do. And even then, they don't do it as well as when they were in their primes. But it's how smart they are. And how efficient they are at what they do. And how they perfect the things that they can still do. And they do them very, very well. This is what people don't understand about boxing. And I'm breaking these gems down. Everybody in boxing know this. The boxers themselves know this and so on. And that's why the younger boxers today, they're trying to have a nice, long career. And you have to stay behind the defense. If you ain't got no damn defense, you ain't gonna make it very long. All right? Come out of boxing wrecked. Okay? Some of the guys that they call great defensive fighters, I can't call them great defensive fighters because after their careers was over, they punch drunk with CTE, punch drunk syndrome. And some of them, they can't even move now. They can't even talk properly, right? So, that's what I got for you guys. I'm going to catch you guys later on what you need. Peace.